Before we get into the video, I need you guys to do me a favour. Number 1, like the video. Also comment. Let me know your thoughts on the story. Alistair Weekes from the Armley area of Leeds was well connected. He was also a gangster and an enforcer and part of a dangerous gang, International. Now, as I said, he was dangerous and a risk to anyone who he associated with, and he was known for his temper. Those neurotic traits enabled Alistair to also succeed as part of a drug dealing gang. Now, Alistair was well travelled. He was able to speak both Dutch and Spanish. On July 14th of 2010, Alistair Weekes and his half-brother Tyrone Gillard had taken over large patches of the Netherlands, transporting Class A gear in bulk, and they were part of a 7-man gang. They had travelled to a caravan park in rder with the intention of taking John Gubbels as part of a drug feud. Now, John was a marked man and he knew this, having allegedly been responsible for the missing shipment of 400 kilos of Class A gear, coke, from a container in Antwerp. Now, Alistair Weekes was given clear orders: find out where the coke went, get the money for the coke, or K, John and anyone connected with him. Send a clear message. The men banged on the door with enough force that the door rattled to the caravan. There was no answer. No curtains twitched, no signs of movement. So the gang pulled out their GUNs, not knowing that 12-year-old Danny Gubbels and his mum were in the static caravan. The gang were equipped with semi-autos, and in a span of 20 seconds, the gang had let off a spray of shells to the tune of more than 27 rounds had struck the caravan. In response to the booming thud sounds, Danny's mum laid on the floor, her hands over her ears. Danny was tragically struck. Again, he was only 12 years old, and ammo tore through the middle. At first, Danny's mum had no idea her son was struck, but then a pool of red ran across the floor. Danny's mum choked back tears and called for emergency services. By the time emergency services arrived at the address, Danny was in critical condition. His organs were in a bad way, and sadly he was pronounced dead on arrival to the hospital. Alistair Weekes and the gang had made a costly mistake. Dutch police had already had the Gubbels family home under surveillance because they were building a case on John, who was already on the police radar for transporting mountains of coke. A camera's already been placed and set up to survey the property, and it caught Alistair and Tyrone in 720p arriving in a transit van, wearing masks and then positioning themselves around the static caravan, knocking on the door then attempting to force their way in before triggers were squeezed. After the Alistair had abandoned the van, police found it and forensic teams swept the van from top to bottom and lifted DNA samples that came back as positive for Tyrone Gillard, Alistair Weekes and Dutchman Marcelino Frazier. Police were able to place the gangsters at the crime scene. Now, police then began to build a case against the dangerous gang. Police looked through over 100 hours of CCTV that also used witness statements and DNA evidence to construct their case. And in 2013, Tyrone and Marcelino were both jailed for 16 years. Now, Tyrone admitted to driving a van to the M scene. Alistair denied any charges against him, despite the DNA evidence. Now, once his mates were sentenced and his brother, Alistair knew he had to act quick. He had fled to the Netherlands. He escaped. Now, it was alleged that Alistair paid a woman £2,600 to register Alistair as her son, so he could get documents such as passports. He then used the passport, ID cards and fake birth certificates to leave the Netherlands. He then travelled to Colombia, of all places, the drug capital, where he evaded police for over 3 years, and during that time he was on the most wanted list. There was a red alert on him. Now, police later found out that Alistair and Tyrone were working for a Dutch-Moroccan crime boss who went by the name of Scarface. His real name was Samir Boyukan Richan. Now, police says that Samir was one of the biggest kingpins in Europe, having transported large quantities of drugs into Southampton and Antwerp in 2011. Now, Samir was arrested in connection with the Danny Gubbels but the case fell apart when it was deemed that there was not enough evidence against him. Karma would ultimately prevail, because just 2 years later he would fatally been. Now, Alistair Weekes was a wanted man since 2015, when he was sentenced to 20 years in his absence. A then 26-year-old Alistair Weekes was arrested on June 13, 2018, as he was travelling between Bogota and Medellin in Colombia. His arrest came after Alistair's mum had booked a flight to Colombia to see her son. The NCA and the Netherlands police and the Colombian police shared information, and they were able to trace the mum's movements, leading them to Alistair. Alistair, of course, was put in a jail in Colombia and then extradited back to the UK. Alistair was already notorious in the UK and especially Leeds. He had been jailed back in 2001 for striking his brother with sawn-off ammo, and of course, he was jailed for 20 years ultimately for the cold and brutal M of 12-year-old Danny Gubbier. Condolences. Stay safe. Safe.